What's up, guys? This is Zach with Top Deck Nation, and today we're going to be looking at the top 8 decks that were at Roanoke, Virginia Regionals just a couple weeks ago. There's a lot of diversity in the top 8 here. There were like 6 different decks, so it's really exciting just to see all the diversity in the format right now, both in the standard and expanded formats. And yeah, we're just going to jump into that. Like I said, it's going to be a, pretty informal video. In the future, I'm going to try to make these a bit more professional, maybe do some actual video editing in Adobe Premiere, things like that. But, for now, you can check these out on the Pokemon.com website. It's really cool that Pokemon does this. But if you get on the website, you go to attend events up in the corner up here, and then you can actually look at all of the results. So whether you're a TCG player or the VGC, the video game player, they have lots of results here, and you can just kind of learn. I mean, we're pretty much in an age where, all the knowledge and all the information is publicly available. So it's pretty cool after the events are over, just a couple weeks after. All these, event results are up, and you can check for yourself and basically have a nice foundation for a deck if you're new to the game. So just to kick things off, guys, the Masters Division champion, James Arnold, was actually playing a quad Lapras Wobbuffet deck, and it's really interesting. We'll go through it in just a second. But if you want to see a more in-depth look at it, since we're just kind of skimming over these 8 decks, we did post a video up, and I'll post it as a card and in the description of the video as well, so check it out. But here we go. So, he played a Lapras deck, and the goal of this Lapras deck, basically you just sit there and you just collect. You can slowly build up energies on Laprases on the bench and stuff, but you sit here and deny prizes. You disrupt your opponent with things like hammers and Team Flare Grunt, Team Skull Grunt. There's just so many cards in this deck. I mean, look at how many trainer cards we have. 45 trainer cards. So, 75% of his deck is trainer cards, only 5 Pokemon. And that's, a lot of these quad decks, they're called quad decks because you just play the 4 Pokemon and you just kind of, oftentimes just kind of sit there and build up energy. And that's basically what this does. Collect is just drawing 3 cards. Blizzard Burn is a nice attack because it does 160. So with a Fighting Fury belt here, that's going to add 10 more damage. So 170, which is enough to knock out a lot of EXs. And then finally, if you go against something like a Jolteon EX or, just something that's kind of blocking you, you can paralyze it with Ice Beam GX, and that way they can't attack you the following turn. So in the final match, which I believe is on Twitch, I think it was the meta deck, so check them out. I think their channel covered it. But he used Ice Beam against a Jolteon, and that way he could knock it out the following turn, because normally Jolteon can't be touched by basics. So Lapras has a lot of stuff going for it. It's water type, so it works with Rough Seas. It's bulky. It's a basic, so it works with Fighting Fury Belt. And then I think he played Wobbuffet just for the Decidueye matchup, because if you're item locked, obviously, James played a lot of items here. So it just kind of makes your chances a little bit better. Just gives you something to wall with until you get completely set up there. Now, as far as our trainers go, I mean, just kind of look at this list. It's insane. 4 Team Flare Grunt, Delinquent, Hex Maniac, 2 of those, plus Wobbuffet. So, I mean, a pretty solid Decidueye matchup. But, the big talk is the fact that he used Steven in his deck. Now, this is a supporter that is never, ever played, because there's not really a purpose for it. I mean, you play a supporter to search a supporter. That doesn't really make any sense, right? Searching for a supporter in a basic energy. Kind of bland, because you can just play N or Professor Sycamore and probably draw into those anyway. But, in this kind of deck, it works, because even if you're item locked, say you're against a Decidueye deck, I can use Steven and search my deck for a Hex Maniac the following turn, and an energy, so I can use Lapras as collect. So it makes a lot of sense. If you're familiar with the Facebook groups like Verbank City and Heyfonte, things like that, competitive Pokemon groups, this was pretty much like an ongoing kind of like meme for the last week or so. So, yeah, Steven, definitely a really interesting supporter in this deck, and a really intelligent play. I mean, James is a really smart player. He's actually from Lexington, Kentucky, which is where I am. So oftentimes we're in the same card shop playing and things like that. So pretty cool to see Kentucky represented, since it's pretty left out sometimes. But yeah, Steven was a great meta call here. Really great support card for this deck. So, Olympia, we're switching out. Team Rocket's Handiwork, we're discarding cards here. Lots of healing going on. Team Skull Grunt's really interesting because you can essentially wipe their hand out. If they're trying to sit there and just slowly build up energy, well, that's not going to work either, because you can just discard their energy every turn. So really smart there. Like I said, we have hammers, Puzzle of Time to get back practically anything in the deck. And then finally, he plays 2 Nest Ball. A lot of times in these builds where you play these quad variants, you don't really have to have the standard like 4 Ultra Ball or 4 Dive Ball or whatever with this water deck. 2 Nest Ball does it because you can just put Wobbuffet or Lapras on the bench, it searches them out, and you don't have to discard anything. So really good. But overall, this was Quad Lapras, guys. This list is available on the Pokemon.com website, and overall, it was just a really great meta call. He expected certain decks to be there, so he countered them appropriately, and especially Decidueye. Like I said, the Wobbuffet, the Hex Maniac, stuff like that. He came in prepared, and definitely a big congratulations to him. So as far as second place goes, like I said, the Twitch stream from the meta deck, they had this matchup, and I think they covered the entire regionals, so you can check that out. If you've never seen a regionals, you've never been to a regionals or something, they're really fun. They're almost like a mini nationals. So, I mean, there's hundreds of players that gather, and it's pretty much open to like any player. So, I mean, it's pretty crazy. The amount of players you have, the amount of diversity, just pretty crazy. But they did cover this final match, which was pretty interesting. Unfortunately, it was kind of one-sided for James because he just constantly used hammers and things like that. Grant's deck is really reliant on special energy, but he played a quad Wobbuffet deck that used Ninja Boys, so depending on the matchup, you can just kind of switch into different attackers. So Wobbuffet's shutting off abilities the whole game until you need it. Jolteon is great because of this Flash Ray attack. It can't be touched by basics. So things like Volcanion, Yveltal, Darkrai, they can't even touch Jolteon. And a lot of times they're not playing Pokemon Rangers. So what Grant would do is only play a Wobbuffet, nothing on the bench, switch in a Ninja Boy, attack, and suddenly he basically wins the game because nobody really thought about playing Pokemon Ranger. So it definitely worked. Really clever, just an insane meta call. This is your anti-meta deck to the max. But there's also Glaceon, can't be touched by evolutions, so similar. But then we have this 1/1 Arachnid line, and this is why this deck saw a lot of hype after he posted the lists and stuff. It was just kind of crazy how much attention it got. But the Arachnid ability here, it's Water Bubble. It says it can't be touched by fire Pokemon. So just in case, he was in a Volcanion matchup or maybe a different fire deck, he can't be touched by fire types in general, okay? And Volcanion is pretty insane. It can one-shot practically anything in the game. It can use Pokemon Ranger to get around Jolteon because it already plays Pokemon Ranger anyway. So this Water Bubble ability, since it's an ability, unless you play Hex Maniac, you cannot get around it. So basically, there was no way Volcanion could get around this. It would just slowly beat your opponent. And you might try to use Shaman. You might think that's a way to get around it, just to kind of use Sky Return constantly. But, I mean, that's not really efficient because I can hit you for 70, and eventually you just get kind of knocked out. You're not going to be doing enough damage. So just an insane meta call deck here, guys. And as far as his trainers and stuff go, I mean, as you can see, lots of healing cards, lots of disruption cards like Team Flare Grunt. Similar approach to James, really very similar deck in many ways, but also different in some ways as well. So good to keep that in mind. But, overall, I mean, it's a very similar strategy. And, ultimately, James was able to beat him mainly because Grant's deck is so reliant on the special energy. It gets to the point where he's out of energy, so Lapras can just kind of run rampant there. So, big congratulations to him as well. I mean, it's definitely no joke to be second place in a regionals. I think James ended up winning like $5,000, so I think Grant won like $2,500. So I mean, definitely. Nothing to be ashamed of whatsoever. I mean, that's a lot of money, and it's really great to see Pokemon pouring that money into these tournaments. I mean, they've done a lot of regionals this year. Definitely more prize support going on. So as far as our top 4, I'll go over these a little bit, but not as much as the top 2. We have Daniel Altavia, very well-known player, places at a lot of events. He played a Turbo Darkrai deck, and the first thing I saw that was kind of different, the first 2 things, one, he's not playing a Hoopa EX. He's not... I guess he just didn't want to get it stuck active by like Decidueye Vileplume or something like that. He's playing 4 Darkrai EX, so I mean, really thick Darkrai line. It's a very simple strategy here. put a bunch of energy on Darkrai and everything else on the board, and just do a lot of damage. But the second thing I noticed was 13 energy, 13 dark energy. So typically this kind of deck plays like 11 to 12 dark energy. You know, I'm guessing he just kind of took the Hoopa out and replaced it with energy, but it's going to increase your chances for max elixir. So he's really just quickly overwhelming his opponent here. If his opponent can't, you know, stop him in time, you know, he pretty much wins because he's just eventually one-shotting everything that his opponent throws out at him. And as you can see here in the trainer cards, he plays 3 Lysander, and that was definitely for Decidueye. You know, you don't want to be item locked. You want to go ahead and bring up that Vileplume, knock it out if you can, and that way it evens the odds, evens the table. 2 Hex Maniac as well. Like I said, Decidueye Vileplume, this was the deck to beat at Roanoke Regionals. And so a lot of these players, they're playing 2 Hex Maniac, they're playing 1 or 2 Wobbuffet, even though it doesn't really fit with the strategy of the deck. And they're doing that just because the abilities are just so strong. Item lock is strong. Being able to spread damage, it's really strong. You know, all of that is just really, really good. But other than that, I mean, it's a pretty standardized list here. We have, you know, the Reverse Valley to do extra damage. We have the max elixirs to make sure the energy are going on the board. But, you know, fairly simple strategy. You know, you just put a bunch of dark energy on the board using max elixir, and then you dark pulse for more and more damage, depending on how much dark energy is on your side. So the other top 4 deck is from Aaron Tarble. It's a Decidueye Vileplume. No surprise there. Probably the most played deck at the tournament. It made 2 of the top 8 spots. And Aaron's a pretty well-known player as well. I'm sure he has his Worlds invite at this point. I think he's topped at a few different regionals already this year. But this is a pretty standardized list. I mean, I probably wouldn't change anything in this list, to be honest. I mean, there's nothing worth considering changing. I mean, it's just your standard Decidueye Vileplume list. You get a bunch of Decidueye out. You can spread damage really easily every turn. Vileplume's locking your items, so your opponent can't play, like, you know, a good half of their deck, to be honest, like Ultra Ball, Verse Seeker, Trainer's Mells, stuff like that. So really disruptive. And then finally, Lugia just kind of punishes your opponent. If you have, if you use this Arrow Ball attack, it does 20 times the number of energy attached to you and your opponent's active Pokemon. So if they try to pile up energy, Lugia really likes that because it can just come back and just kind of knock your opponent out. But also because of Deep Hurricane. Deep Hurricane is great because you can discard a stadium and it does more damage. So 170 damage. Now pair that up with Decidueye and suddenly you're kind of one-shotting pretty much anything in its path. And it's insane because, you know, you play double colorless energy. So 2 attachments of that in 2 turns, you're already doing that much damage. And, you know, it wasn't really meant to be so broken because you do have things like Enhanced Hammer, Team Flare Grunt, stuff like that. But, you know, when you're item locked, you can't play the hammers, and it's just so hard to draw into what you need when you're item locked. So really consistent, really straightforward. If you watch the last couple videos, I posted about how I won over 400 packs on PTCGO this past weekend, and this was basically the deck I used. I think it was 1 card off. I can't remember what I played that was different. I know I didn't play the Beedrill in here, but, you know, it was essentially the same deck. And I ended up winning like dozens of tournaments. I had so many tickets, and I know you guys comment all the time. You're like, oh, how many, you know, why don't you spend the tickets, all of that. And I had finally spent them, and I ended up with like 400 and some packs, you know, 200 and I think 280 of them were Guardians Rising. So I can, you know, the good thing is I can finally push out more videos for you guys. But yeah, I mean, the deck itself is just super consistent, not really much to go over here. You know, if you're new to the game, this is a pretty, you know, it's a pretty interesting deck to play. There's a lot of different ways you're disrupting your opponent. You're doing big damage. So, I mean, really good deck to kind of jump into play if you're wanting something really competitive and worth investing into. So we're going to go ahead and start doing the top 8 now, starting with Igor Costa. Now, I think there was another regional this past weekend, and I think he actually ended up getting like top 4 in this one as well. I think it was Wisconsin regionals. I could be wrong, but, you know, I think he top 4'd in that one as well. And, you know, Igor is well known. I think he ended up winning the 2012 World Championship and ended up getting like 2nd in the 2014. But I mean, he places in a lot of things here. He's a Portuguese player, I believe. And I think he's in the United States right now. I'm not really sure exactly, but I'm pretty sure he's been living here for a while. So he's been attending a lot of these U.S. regional events. But Igor, definitely needs no introduction. Also played Decidueye Vileplume, but his build is slightly different. Instead of playing the grass energy and really focused on Lugia and Decidueye and stuff, he plays a lot of these other attackers. We have Mewtwo. Mewtwo is great against things like Mega Mewtwo, Yveltal, things like that. It's very similar to Lugia, the attack. It does 20 more damage for each energy attached to your opponent's active, so not quite as strong, but it is a one prize attacker, so it's kind of forcing your opponent to take an extra knockout. And then Regice is really good. I think he said it was pretty much like the MVP of the tournament. Pretty much the same strategy as Grant Manley here. If you can't Pokemon Ranger around Regice, you're in big trouble because this is blocking damage from Pokemon EXs. So, pretty much everything. Mega Gardevoir, Mega Mewtwo, Yveltal, Volcanion, Darkrai, everything in its path. Not GXs, but EXs, which are still extremely popular. Lugia, things like that. And because of that, you have to play Rainbow. But the good thing is that Rainbow does work with every type. So it counts as a grass energy, counts as a psychic. Not that you'll ever use barrier. I mean, you might, but not really that often. Counts as a water. So really clever there. And otherwise, it's your standard supporter line, trainer line, etc. But Igor has probably definitely sealed the deal as far as his World's Invite here. So congratulations to him. And then we also have Austin Vance here. He played a Mega Mewtwo deck, and I think, this is one of two Mega Mewtwo decks in the top 8. The other one, it looks like it also made top 8 here. But Austin, it's a pretty standard build. A lot of times these Mega Mewtwo players, they've been playing Wobbuffet lately, and that's just so they can get set up with Decidueye. It provides an alternate attacker. Wobbuffet's ability actually says that Psychic abilities still work, so it's awfully convenient for this deck because I can search out Hoopa, I can use Scoundrel Ring, and suddenly I can get my Mewtwo, my Mega Mewtwo, and maybe a second Mewtwo or something, whatever you need basically. But it's a very consistent deck. As you can see here, there's nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, he's got your float stones to retreat with, the 4 spirit links for consistency, the Parallel City and Shrine of Memories. This is a typical split, a 2-2. Parallel City is great against things like Mega Gardevoir, Mega Mewtwo, pretty much anything that has a really big bench, oftentimes like Volcanion. And then Shrine of Memories is probably one of the best cards in here because it says that each Pokemon or each player's evolved Pokemon can use the attacks of their previous evolutions. And so Mega Mewtwo, it's already pretty good. It's got 210 HP, has a good attack, but suddenly you can use Damage Change, which basically swaps the damage with your opponent. So if I've got 110 damage on me, I can just Lysander up a Shaman, Damage Change, and suddenly the Shaman's knocked out and I've just healed all of my damage. So in general, this is a really fun deck to play. It's really good. I mean, who doesn't like Mewtwo? It's probably my favorite Pokemon just because it's had so much attention. I remember the first movie. Mewtwo is one of the few Pokemon that has a lot of backstory. So, I'm always a big fan of these Mewtwo decks that pop up. So, it's pretty much it. So the other Mega Mewtwo deck is very similar. I think it's only a couple cards off when I was looking at it. For example, this one is playing Garbodor. So, it's a little bit different, I guess. The other one didn't really play Garbodor, did it? No, it didn't. So this one is actually a Garbodor variant. And so you're really focused on shutting off abilities. Hopefully you can shut off Decidueye. That's probably one of the main goals of this deck. Get that Trebuchet, put a Floatstone on it, and hope that they can't bring it out and knock it out. So, you're just kind of shutting off abilities here. But otherwise, very similar deck. It looks like she's playing Skyla. But otherwise pretty similar deck here. Not really much to talk over. It's a really strong deck overall, and they're both playing 4 Mega Turbo, of course, just because you're trying to power up Mewtwo and just do a whole lot of damage with Psychic Infinity. The more damage, the more energy on, this Pokemon and your opponent. So in that sense, it's kind of like X-Ball. The more damage you're going to be doing. So eventually you're just kind of one-shotting all of your opponents there. And finally, we have a Volcanion deck that made top 8 by Main Ahmed. And Volcanion is one of my favorite decks. It's just so much fun to play. And honestly, I probably wouldn't change a card in this because I just love it so much. This deck list is really good. You know, your typical Pokemon line, typically that's what it's going to look like. A 4 Volcanion EX, 3 Baby Volcanion, 2 Shaman, and a Hoopa, so he's not really straying far away from that. I know a lot of people play like Entei or Flareon, but he's going with something nice and simple for that consistency factor. He's playing a whopping 13 Fire Energy. Typically, I would usually play 11 or 12, but I mean, it's really important here because the Decidueye pairs extremely nicely with Scorched Earth. You can just keep drawing cards every turn, hopefully. It's going to increase your chances of using Max Elixir and hitting that energy. So in general, I mean, it's just a really good play, probably meta call a little bit, as was the 3 Lysander. It seems like 3 Lysander, just going by this list here, it's kind of become standard in these regional tournaments where Decidueye is expected to be, you know, kind of like a clear winner here. So Decidueye is pretty insane. I mean, it's, you know, trying to be countered by Hex Maniac, Wobbuffet, Guardians Rising has things like Sylveon and Machoke and stuff to counter it, but it's still a force to be reckoned with. I mean, in the right circumstances, it's just almost near impossible to beat. So the item lock's just way too strong right now, especially. So 3 Lysander, you know, very good meta call here. The Olympia just to kind of switch out, even if you're stuck. So if Volcanion gets stuck, you can bring it out. But yeah, I mean, this is a pretty typical Volcanion list. Your strategy here, if you haven't really played Volcanion, you're using Steam Up, and this ability says you discard a fire and your fire Pokemon do 30 more damage. And then you just use the baby Volcanion, which is doing a lot of damage because of that, and you're just kind of accelerating energy. And then it gets to the point where Volcanic Heat, which is Volcanion EX's attack, you're going to be one-shotting your opponent here because you're doing 130, 3 Steam Ups would equal 90 damage, so you're doing 220 damage, and that's pretty much enough to knock out everything in the game. So yeah, but that's going to pretty much wrap it up, guys. This is Roanoke Regionals. Now all of the divisions are available here, so if you like the senior division, junior division, if you're a younger player and want to see how you know, a lot of the competitive players that age like to play, you can always check that out. And again, you know, it's really awesome that these deck lists are publicly available. You know, it's something that wouldn't happen a few years ago, but everything's really changed. We're really in the age of, you know, YouTube and Twitter and things like that. So it's really cool to see all of this available to players. But just let me know what you guys think about this, what you think about the top 8. Were there any decks that you thought would make it, or are there any surprises about the top 8? Are you going to be attending the next regionals in the next few weeks or so? And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel, guys. We're closing in at 2,000 subscribers. I'm really hoping to, you know, just kind of build a community this summer. I'm going to try to push these videos out every day, so your support means a whole lot. But in the meantime, this has been Zach with Top Deck Nation. Thanks so much for watching again, guys, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.